Bienvenidos, everyone. Welcome to our recording for the Venture Best Spotlight, in which we're talking about the intersection between legal and artificial intelligence. Today we have one of Michael Best's partners, Derek Stettner, Dr. Brad Gillman, and Karl Seelback. So I'll pass it over to Derek so he can take it away.
Thank you very much, Nathan, and thank you everyone for coming. We're excited to be here. We're excited to be live podcasting from Austin. So this morning we've got two entrepreneurs who have developed AI solutions. We're going to talk about those and tell you about what they've done with respect to their businesses, how they've commercialized it, and where they think the future of AI is going. Before we get to that, I want to just tell you a little bit more about myself. So my name is Derek Stettner. I'm a partner at Michael Best and Friedrich. I'm a partner in our intellectual property and technology transfer group. My background is electrical engineering, and I help clients and companies protect their IP and license it. And when we talk about licensing these days, we're talking about licensing AI and data. And for those of you who are interested in data, please stick around for the second session. We're going to talk more about that in terms of data privacy and cybersecurity. Brad, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll wait to talk about your company. But just introduce yourself a little bit, because you're quite a remarkable person.
Thank you. First, I want to thank Michael Best and Associates for inviting me here today, as well as everybody that's on the stage, including Derek and Karl. My name is Brad Gillman. I'm a practicing orthopedic surgeon, senior partner at Austin Sports Medicine here in Austin, Texas, and co-founder and COO of Gale AI. Gale AI was created out of necessity, might be the easiest way to describe it. One of my co-founders, Grant Muller, as well as our other co-founder, Tyler Gonzalez, we regularly talked about the pains of the archaicness of medicine, the billing and coding system, the fights that we have back and forth with our coders, the time delays in getting paid. And Grant and I were sitting at the tiniest bar in Texas here in Austin talking about our difficulties, and I was really going over these pains of getting notes transcribed, getting the correct codes. And what happened is he said, you know what, I think we can make a computer do the majority of this for us. And I said, you know, and Grant's a really smart guy. He'll tell you that he's a computer nerd. And so we started Gale AI in 2019. We brought on Tyler Gonzalez to assist us, and we co-founded Gale AI to use AI, machine learning, natural language processing to interpret operative and clinical dictations, get them coded into the correct CPT and ICD-10 codes, and then get them over to the billing department as fast as possible and as accurate as possible. And over the course of the last 4 years, we have some pretty big accomplishments. We have been able to reduce the time it takes to dictate an operative note from 74 minutes down to 2 minutes. We've been able to get about 90% accuracy with our AI algorithms, and we were able to generate increased revenue. And by that, what I mean is, I'm going to give you a little story. So when Grant and I were talking, we were talking about coding these notes, and we talked, and he said, hey, I build this CPT code for every one of my fracture cases. And I go, you mean you can do that? I thought that was all bundled into this other code. And he goes, no, you can do this. And it turns out it's worth about $40 every time you do it. And I've done probably 2,000, 3,000 fractures at that time. And I go, you mean that I've missed $40 every time I've done this? And he goes, yeah. I go, we need something that can catch these things and educate us on the fly and make sure that we're not missing these codes and the documentation that needs to go with it. And so we've been able to show a revenue uplift by using our Gale AI system of about 8% in a small study with some spine doctors out in Washington. The final part I kind of want to push is that we also use generative AI. And so this is the new buzz, the Chat GPT and all of that. And we've incorporated generative AI into some of our appeals processes and our documentation. And initially, it was a big pitfall. You know, it was a when it first came out, there was hallucinations and all these things, but we've really kind of honed it down on what we needed to use it for, and it's really been an asset to us in our company. We currently have a web-based platform. We just launched into a major medical record system. We have users all around the southeast United States, from Texas all the way over to Georgia. And we're working on getting a few major hospitals online in the next month or two. And then finally, we're going to be raising a seed round here in the next coming months, and hoping to raise money to increase development and then increase our sales team.
Karl, thank you so much. I think 2 points that I want to take away from that is that you were using maybe some AI for the dictation part. I don't know if that's true, but then as you also mentioned, and that was kind of a predictive AI, and then you're also using generative AI, which will help you write up essentially the arguments, the documentation that you need to submit for an appeal when your claims get denied or when your physician's claims get denied. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things that we've identified is that in the last 2 years, actually the denials of codes have went up 2% across the board. And so one of the things we're looking at is why not submit to them the appeals process right away so they can't deny it because it's right there, and the insurance company goes, oh, well, they're using Gale AI, you might as well just pay them. And so we've decided to incorporate that and make it a second document in our billing or coding process, so that you have not only the codes, but you have the written definition of why we billed what we did, why we coded, and why it fits certain criteria.
Thanks very much. So one of the, I think, similarities between Brad's company and Karl's company is the use of natural language processing. So Karl, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Scribe AI?
So, testing, is this on? I think this one may have kicked off. Maybe sleeping. Test. Okay, here we go. So I'm Karl Seelback. I'm an attorney out of Austin, Texas. I'm the founder and managing partner of Doylan Seelback, which has about 15 attorneys and 11 paralegals and staff members. I'm also the founder of Scribe.AI, that's Scribe with a K. And so, yeah, I'm based in Austin, and we defend companies in personal injury cases and also do commercial litigation.
So, Karl, tell me a little bit more about some of the problems that you ran into. I mean, what was it that kind of motivated you and your co-founders to say, look, there's a problem out there, and we need to find a solution to it? Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so for me, as an attorney, as a young attorney, this was pre-COVID, I would travel across the state and across the nation taking depositions. And if you've ever seen a deposition, or maybe you've seen a courtroom drama, you often see the court reporter who's typing on a little stenography machine. And if you've never looked at one of those machines, they're kind of crazy looking. They don't have any letters on them, and it's a phonetic keyboard. And that keyboard was invented in 1877. And the technology to capture testimony really hasn't changed much in the last 150 years. And so for me as an attorney, I would go to these depositions, and I would have to wait weeks to get a copy of my transcript and get a copy of my video. And when I did get them, they were either a PDF or a thumb drive or video on a DVD. And there wasn't a quick and easy way for me to create video clips and share the key evidence with my client. And so what Scribe does is we take the capture of testimony into the present day technology. We combine AI with video recording, remote video recording through Zoom, and we capture those records almost instantaneously, and they're available within about an hour of the deposition.
So Karl, you just mentioned Zoom, and I want to explore that a little bit more. So if you use Zoom or you use Teams, there's a capability there that it will create a transcription.
That's right.
So tell me a little bit more about why. I mean, if I had a video deposition, for example, I could just push a button and get a transcription, I think. tell me a little bit more about why you're different and what you really have
Sure.
achieved with your product built on top of Zoom.
Yeah, it's a great question. So to capture legal testimony, you really need a trusted third-party intermediary, right? It can't just be one side using a consumer app to capture the record. You need someone to authenticate the video recording. You need someone to distribute it to the witness and their attorney so that they can review it and review the video recording. And if there's a transcript, review the transcript. So there's a lot of technicalities around capturing legal testimony. Even the format of the transcript itself is unique. And so those are a lot of the nuances associated with capturing legal testimony.
All right, thank you. And then just one more question before we move on to a different topic. Tell me a little bit about, do you have a relationship with Zoom, or do you have, loosely speaking, a partnership?
Yeah, we're actually a Zoom ISV partner. So we have a team at Zoom that works with the Scribe team hand in hand on everything from development questions to go-to-market discussions. We've even had some very encouraging discussions with Zoom Ventures, which is their investment arm of the company. They are always looking for ways to empower startups and software companies to better leverage the Zoom platform. And it's already taken place in the medical industry. They have a lot of partners in the medical industry on telemedicine. And so they're actively looking for other verticals where they can deploy the Zoom solution in a unique way to better serve their customers.
All right, thanks very much. Appreciate that. So for both of you, and I'm going to start with Brad, I'd like to move on to a slightly different topic. So both of you and your co-founders kind of recognize these problems in the industries that you're in. I mean, Karl, you're a lawyer. Brad, you're a surgeon. And you're there and you're saying, hey, I think I can use AI to help solve a problem, and that's really important. But tell me a little bit about, some things that either developers or entrepreneurs should keep in mind when they're trying to, think about, how do I apply AI? How do I build a solution that, I can build into a company and make money off of?
I mean, I would say the number one thing is probably don't build anything first. I would say the very first thing you should do is customer discovery, and go talk to the people that you want to sell to so that you can validate that there is a problem that needs to be solved. And even after you've done that, if there's a way that you can test that and validate that problem and solution without spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop something, do that. Go license some technology and prove out that, yes, there's a customer, they have a need, and we could potentially sell to that need. So I think that one of the traps that it's easy to fall into when you're starting a company is you have this idea of what your vision is, what your long-term vision is, and you try to build to that too early. And so if you can just slow down a little bit and first validate the problem and spend a lot of time doing customer discovery, your product will ultimately be better for it. At Scribe, for example, we did 300 customer discovery calls in the year leading up to releasing the product. And we actually recorded those calls, and we began to garner insights from those calls. And we even leveraged some of the feedback that we got in those customer discovery calls. They were almost like a combination of pre-sale calls where we were talking to potential customers, and we were lining up potential investors through some of those calls as well. Both attorneys who heard the pitch and decided it was something they were interested in investing in, but also getting some of those quotes that validated the problem that we were trying to solve. We would take that to other investors and show them, hey, this isn't just us, drinking our own Kool-Aid. This is a real thing that other people, they see the problem as well.
All right, and Brad, I hate to put you on hold for a little bit, but I want to follow up with Karl on one thing. So you talked about 300 customer calls. It's a little different for me, but I get solicitations daily. I get an email about certain things. I sit on our firm's AI Center of Excellence, and so I've been doing some testing of AI tools for my own practice and for our own business. How did you get those calls? Because you're asking someone to give up their time and talk to you and tell you about their impressions of what you have to offer.
Well, you ignored our email. No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
It went right to spam.
It was primarily personal network, so it wasn't only that, but it was primarily attorneys that I had either worked with in the past or that someone on our team knew. I mean, and Brad and I were talking about this earlier, and he may want to speak to it. If you're going to start a company, you have to be willing to lean on friends and family and people in your network. I mean, my gosh, if they're not going to talk to you, who will?
Thanks. Brad, your thoughts on this topic?
So I think my first point would be this, is identify the problem and understand the problem. I think too many times we come out and we go, oh, there's an issue, and it pains me. But then when you go into Karl's point and you talk to people, you find out that your problem may not be somebody else's problem. And so when you take the time to identify that problem and then begin to come up with a solution, that I think is the most important part of starting the company. I agree completely with Karl, and I will say that at Gale AI, we had numerous clinics demoing our MVP, and I think that's the other part, is too many people, the MVP is kind of a forethought and an afterthought, and it's quickly washed over to get to the main product. But I think the MVP provides people with that information, and it allows you to demo and get their feedback. So you showing them the product, you showing them the MVP, and asking for their feedback. And on that point, you have to be a listener. You have to listen to their pain points. You have to hear what they're saying. You don't want to be controlling conversations. You want to let them speak freely, and then take that back to your team and understand that problem even more. How you incorporate AI is, once you identify that problem, you need to have AI that will solve that problem without adding and burdening your company. I think too many people want to slap an AI on something and call it AI, and you find out that really there might be people behind the process, kind of like Wizard of Oz, don't look behind the curtain, because there's somebody back there doing human things that you're calling AI. And that works, there's human in the loop, there's all these different AI products that you can use, but at the end of the day, if you're going to incorporate it, you need it to work seamlessly in your company and not just put it in to add another layer of complexity to your business.
So one of the things that I'm hearing there is kind of interesting. When we've gone through this, you don't want to just become, hey, I've got AI to try and generate buzz or interest, and then not really have any substance behind that, because you're just kind of using it to say, well, yeah, I'm an AI company. It's kind of like saying, well, I'm a .com company 20 years ago, right? It just, oh, really? Oh, okay, wow, I should invest in you, right? Because you have AI. Do you really have something that is AI? When you think about, what you've done, right? What did you do in terms of like figuring out what AI to use? I think, Brad, let me start with you. Did you build it or did you license it in?
So we built everything from scratch. And so with that, Grant being our CTO could definitely lend more insight, but he had a lot of knowledge of kind of the groundwork. And what we did is we worked with a consultant, and here's another piece of advice is definitely rely on a consultant to help you develop your baseline product. I think rather than trying to buy a dev team and build something, having someone that knows the space and understands it. So we have a consultant who works with the Department of Defense, who's a machine learning PhD, and he really helped us create our algorithm, build our algorithm. And so it's a unique process where we're stacking different machine learning and natural language processes on top of one another to get our desired outcome. And so with that, we relied on his expertise, and then from there, we used a lot of different developers to help build the product once we created kind of the framework for that.
All right, thanks. And Karl, I think we've talked about it a little bit, but maybe just to make sure we've closed the loop on this, you're building upon the Zoom platform. So what were there parts or pieces of it that you built, or was it mostly, sort of working from Zoom? Go ahead.
Yeah, so with Scribe AI, it's a combination of a couple of things. For the hosting the live events, it's powered by Zoom, and we did that very intentionally. It's because attorneys and their clients and judges are already used to Zoom, and they didn't have to learn a new system. Frankly, a lot of the attorneys that we work with, their companies have firewalls that prevent some random, online meeting company from even working. So Zoom has really been a catalyst for us for growth because it makes it so easy for the witnesses and the attorneys and anyone who needs to join the deposition can join. They often already have, Zoom on their phone or their iPad or on their computer. Now, our software is capturing that information from Zoom and processing it on the back end. And so we have, now, we didn't go out and build our own ASR, automated speech recognition system from scratch. I personally think that would have been crazy, and it would have cost millions and millions of dollars, and still probably wouldn't have been as good as some of the state-of-the-art systems that are available. So we do License One, which we are tuning to be specific to the legal market. And we're also working on right now developing some generative AI features to implement into the platform as well that are on our roadmap. But we don't want to come to something with market just to have a shiny object, right? There's a lot of companies rushing some generative AI solution just so they can say they have generative AI. We want to be a little bit more intentional and methodical in how we implement it and what we try to solve, and to do it in a unique way.
All right, so I want to talk about your roadmap a little bit later in our discussion here, but so I'll circle back to that. What I want to talk to or address at the moment is for both of you, and again, maybe Karl, I'll start with you. Tell me some of the trials and tribulations, and this might be broader than AI, right? Tell me, what it's been like the last 3-4 years as you've gotten off the ground and built this. Sure. And I think this is advice for almost any company, but tell me what you've gone through to get to where you are today.
Yeah, so we're not that far into it yet. So we're about 2 years in, but we already have some war stories, so to speak, right? Some stories from the trenches. And the one that comes to mind first is you have to be almost religiously disciplined about defining your MVP, right? It's minimum viable product. It can be so tempting to expand beyond that, to add features that you personally want, that other people want. But as soon as you have reached the point where someone will pay you money in exchange for that widget, that's your MVP. And you should stop right there, and you should start selling it, because the number one place you need to look for what you build next are your paying customers, right? And so we are still doing customer discovery. Now, attorneys can be hard to get on the phone, like we talked about earlier, but we're still, any attorney who will talk to us who attended a Scribe deposition or who has uploaded, we also have Scribe Library, which is for uploading past audio and video files. We want that feedback. We try to talk to their paralegals, their assistants, all of their team members, so that we can figure out what to build next. But so for me, the story would be, we built too much. We tried to build too much on the front end that first year, and ultimately ran into some pretty big, obstacles along that journey. And we actually had to scratch a fair amount of what we had built and start fresh with a cleaner code base so that we could ship our MVP. So that was a lesson that cost us both time and it cost us money, but we came out the other end of it and we're better for it. And it certainly was something that, if I could do it over again, I would do differently.
All right, so I don't know if you agree with me, but some of what you're talking about sounds a little bit like spiral development in terms of starting out with your MVP, your minimally viable product, and then listening to the customer, the voice of the customer, and building from there. Brad, your comments, please.
I'm going to talk about two things. So one is going to be, as a full-time orthopedic surgeon, balancing the time for a startup. And I think with that, it is, you have to dedicate the time to the startup. You have to dedicate time away from your regular job. You have to make sure the legal's all set up. You know, one of the things that I did is I had a lawyer look at my contract to make sure that it was okay of what I was doing. And so some contracts, you know, your company that you're working with or working for may own your intellectual property. And so you want to make sure that that is all clean before you start to create your company or your product. But then also you need to dedicate the time to it. We can't work 2 full-time jobs, and so it may mean that you have to take a little step back or reduce your for me it's patient load in order to accommodate this, or take, you know, I take days away to where I'm going to sell my product. And my partners know, they understand, they know that this is part of the process. And so I think that is one of our trials and tribulations. The second part would be not getting distracted. And I say that because when you start getting feedback, you start noticing that there's more than one pain point, and you want to stay laser focused through the early parts of your startup to make sure that you can get from point A to point B, get to that minimal viable product in a timely fashion without a huge overhead cost to you. That kind of goes to the spiraling development as well, is that you go down this path and someone says, hey, what about this thing? And then all of a sudden the next thing you know, you're starting to fade away out of what you were initially trying to develop, and then you have to come back, and that takes time, that takes money. And I think that staying laser focused, listening to the critiques and the comments, but then also focusing on the end product is very important. And we did that. We had a period where we kind of swayed away for about 3 or 6 months, where we got feedback and we had all these different arms that we were planning, but we're not at that point of creating many verticals to our company, and we had to go back to just get the MVP, get the product, get the demos, you know, get back onto that roadmap of creating a successful company.
So Brad, one of the things that you said there, it's really kind of interesting to me, because I think of your company as being pretty focused, right? The way our medical system has just evolved over time, hey, I'm a surgeon. The way I'm going to get paid is through some type of insurance reimbursement, and I've got to basically describe what I did. I've got to use these CPT codes, which are procedure codes. It's a sort of common nomenclature, right, if I understand it correctly. And if I don't use those codes correctly and I don't describe my procedure correctly, I may not get paid. So how did you get waylaid? How did you get off track?
So a lot of different things. So when we talked to people, they said, oh, well, you know, we want to, the residents, the medical education, and so we started to look at a medical education arm. And then we were looking at, when you do operative notes, we could extract out the different instruments you used and build case cards. And then we started to dabble into a clinic engine before we were really ready to do that. And so it was all these things that people asked for. There's the general engine, and so CPT codes are here, but then you have also all these modifiers that amend to it. And so if we can't develop the initial CPT code, all these modifiers don't really make sense to develop yet. And so what happened is we started to chase after some of these things, and it was like, all right, you know, come back to here, let's develop our product, let's develop our MVP before we chase all of these different things. And they're all on our roadmap now, but we have pushed them back and said, all right, you know, we're not going to chase this until it comes time, or until we have the manpower, the finances to do that next step.
What caused the realization? What turned the light bulb on when you're like, wait a minute, we shouldn't be worried about this. We should just go back and focus on the core issue, which is how do we deal with the surgeon dictations and the coding to make sure that the physicians get paid, and let's forget about these other aspects.
It was money and time. So what happens is you watch your bank account, and all of a sudden you're spending money doing multiple developments, and our development team then was being sidetracked by these other little mini side projects. And with that, all of a sudden, the bank account starts to go down, and you look at that and go, oh, well, what happened? Why is our expenditures much higher, and why are we not hitting, the milestone? And so it was a quick realization, because with a group of 3 people that are keeping us checks and balances, from that standpoint, it was easy to catch it and say, all right, let's not work on that. Let's not spend time on that. We need to focus here.
All right, so thank you very much. What I want to do now is just maybe move to a different topic, and I want to talk a little bit about what you think the future might look like with respect to AI. So, Karl, you mentioned you do have a roadmap, and so I think you're thinking about, hey, what features can we put into our product, but also where's the technology going to go, and for example, depending upon where the technology goes, what is it going to allow us to do? So talk a little bit about where you think things are going.
Yeah. So, at Scribe AI right now, the problem that we are solving is to take a deposition to capture legal testimony currently costs $800 per hour of testimony, and you don't get a copy of your transcript and video for about 3 weeks. So we cut that cost by more than half, and you get your record, video synced record, the same day as the event. So that's the problem we're solving today. What we're looking at for the longer term roadmap is how can we empower attorneys and their clients to do more with software? And so, for example, can we help them get ready for the deposition? Can we help the witness get ready for the deposition, right? The most uncomfortable seat in the room is the witness. They're not used to this usually, unless they're maybe an expert. And there's a fair amount of prep that goes into getting a witness ready for a deposition. So imagine if you could use software to actually train that witness, to go through some sample Q&A with that witness. That's something that's interesting that we're looking at. We're also looking at post-event. So let's say you finish a deposition or a hearing or a trial day 1, and you had all of that testimony, and you could cross-reference it using software against all of the other evidence in the case and begin to spot either consistencies or inconsistencies in the testimony and the evidence. That's just a couple of things we're looking at. One of the other big ones is I personally represent a lot of large companies, so a lot of Fortune 500 retailers, grocery stores, things like that. And so some of the conversations we've been having is, imagine you're Walmart, and all of your testimony that currently is just segmented across your outside counsel nationwide, sitting on thumb drives, sitting on repositories, but you can't really get any insight from it. Imagine if all of that was sitting in your Scribe library, and you could apply data analytics and AI against that database, and you could begin to spot risks that you could mitigate against nationwide, maybe areas where you should up your insurance. These depositions are gold mines, right? These witnesses are talking about company policies and procedures, how often people get injured and why. And so there's this huge gold mine of data in the litigation industry that's been untapped, and it's testimony. And so that's a big part of what we're doing. Maybe the last one that I'll mention that's a little more controversial, and I'm not sure that we will get into this or not, is and there's another law firm I've seen that's doing some early development on this, a large firm, and it is actually AI coaching of the attorney who is taking the deposition in real time. So it's processing the transcript, and it is recommending follow-up questions to the attorney to ask the witness. Now, the reason I say we're hesitant to jump into that is, imagine if you're opposing counsel and you see this brand of this software company come across in the deposition notice, you're probably going to say, no, I object. The company that captures the record is supposed to be a third party, a trusted third party who's independent. I don't want them influencing the way the questions and answers are given.
Yeah, so that raises an interesting question, which maybe we can just touch on. We didn't talk about this before, but since you brought it up, one of the things that AI can do for attorneys, for physicians, and even for other decision makers is sort of, hey, provide that advice. And at least at the moment, if there's a legal opinion to be rendered, it's got to be rendered by a person, by a human. And I can have AI perhaps help me in supporting or helping me to determine the decision to make. Same thing with a physician. I mean, you could say, hey, I've got this AI and it's looked at all, this is not what you do, but you could have AI look at x-rays or other images and spot a tumor, right? Fundamentally, that's sort of an object detection problem, right? And it's a prediction. I've looked at all these other images which have tumors, which have been labeled for me, and my prediction is that what I'm seeing now is also a tumor. But ultimately, a physician has to make that call. What you're talking about there is sort of, well, do I have a second attorney in the room? But it's an AI attorney.
Effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting question, and will probably come up on some discussions with respect to attorney ethics in terms of how we use AI in these types of services. So that's an interesting point. Brad, let me get back to you. So we're talking about the future. Where do you think things will go, and where do you think your company might go based upon how AI develops?
So first and foremost, AI's here, and anybody who doesn't believe it's here and set to stay and is not willing to adapt is going to be left far behind. And I think, you know, from listening to Karl and myself, I think legal and medicine are probably some of the most archaic, behind the times fields that have not adopted technology. And we're first getting footsteps into it. As Derek had said, it is very common now that AI is in radiology and seeing these things. I think we're going to continue to see adoption. I think the generative AI is coming. It's, early on, 3, 4, 5 years ago, it was very prone to hallucinations. That has been getting better, but there's still trouble with it. I don't think the fear of, hey, we're going to be an autonomous society with robots is going to be any time in my lifetime, but I do think that we're going to have people using it in everyday activities, in medicine. We have it now where we have, you can set out a little phone, very similar to Karl, where you set out a phone, you have a discussion with your patient, and the generative AI will create your note for you. And just by a simple conversational, hey, how's your hand doing today? I see you got this. And so it's there. I think that it will continue to adapt. I think we will be able to see, in my field, we will see more patients. The documentation burden will be less, and so therefore we'll be able to see more patients, we'll be able to treat patients more effectively, we'll be able to reduce the cost of overhead, which I all think is necessary to continue the medical field, because if you don't know, costs are going up, reimbursements are going down, and physician practices are being lost, daily or weekly, and so this will help some of these practices stay afloat, continue to treat patients, especially in rural areas.
Well, thank you so much. We've got about 15 minutes here. I've got a couple other points that I wanted to go over, but before I did that, I just wanted to see were there any questions from the audience. We can happy to take those and have that discussion. Anyone? All right, if anything comes to mind, please do raise your hand. We'd like to hear from you. So we've talked a little bit about the future. Let me, again, this is not a topic that we talked about before, but we briefly mentioned, and Brad, you briefly mentioned, well, hey, I hired a lawyer to help me out with respect to determining whether I could be sort of an employee working for a medical practice, which I assume you were an employee, not an owner.
I'm actually an owner.
Oh, you okay?
Yep,
So,
I'm
but you
senior managing partner.
at the medical practice.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So an owner, maybe a little different from an employee, but nonetheless, can I be a partner at my medical practice? Can I also be an entrepreneur at a separate company? Where else did you use lawyers? And maybe a more specific question: did you use lawyers when you were licensing in any of this AI technology?
So we've used lawyers all along the way, from building our initial contracts of creating the LLCs to creating the incorporated company. We've used lawyers for building EULAs and BAAs, and especially with the AI and the data privacy. It's very important. In medicine, it is Fort Knox to get a hospital to open up their medical records. And so when we go to an institution, we have to work with their legal team, but we are also the company, and so we can't create a new user agreement for every institution, and so we had to work with our legal teams to make sure that this fit. One of the things that we're in the process of doing, so the AI and the technology is very difficult to patent, but we're looking at patenting the processes that we're using rather than just the technology itself. And so anybody can open up, generative AI, ChatGPT, and say, I'm going to use this in my company, but it's how you use it and the processes that we're looking at potentially patenting. We're in the early processes of that, but that is something that in the future we're going to be looking at doing so that we have that patentable and that it is our intellectual property.
Yeah, just on that comment, based upon my own experience, yeah, I think with any type of technology, you can kind of make the analogy between AI technology and just software technology in general. There is a way to go to protect it. You're going to use copyright law, you're going to use trade secret law, and you're potentially going to use patent law for the various aspects of it. Some of the data that you're potentially going to use, you've got to figure out how you're going to use that, who's going to kind of control that. We're going to have a session that's going to talk more about the data coming up in a few minutes, so we'll let you guys discuss that later. But I will say that I think it's important, particularly for a smaller company, to try and figure out how do I protect my assets and try to at least give me some leverage in case the bigger company comes along and just says, oh, that's a great idea, I'll just build it. And then you're fighting the giant, which can be a challenge. Karl, you are a lawyer, but did you use other lawyers, and what did you do on the licensing side particularly?
I only use ChatGPT for no.
ChatGPT, how do I license an AI model? And
That's
it gave
right.
you an answer.
That's right. No, we actually have two sets of outside counsel. We have one national firm that helps us analyze admissibility questions nationwide because, obviously attorneys are very used to doing things the old-fashioned way with stenographers. And while most states are very favorable to what we're doing, which is referred to by attorneys as non-stenographic depositions or testimony, there are some states where it's a little more nuanced. So we have one set of outside counsel that guides us on that, and then we have another outside counsel who's on the more transactional attorney who helps us with everything from the company formation documents to vesting agreements for some of the early team members, all those types of things. And for startup founders who are early on in the process, say the first 6 months to a year, or even the first 2 years, time well spent is probably rolling up your sleeves and making sure all of your agreements are organized, right? That your cap table doesn't get too messy, that you're using something like 212 or Carta or something else to manage your cap table, because as you're attracting investors both in the seed round, and Scribe's currently finishing up a seed round, we've raised about $3 million. We've got another $500,000 that we're going to raise before we shift into Series A later this year. But when you're raising, the more organized you can be with that, the easier it is on the investors. And frankly, some of the investors I've talked to who complimented how organized we were said, you wouldn't believe some of the messes that I see when I open up the Google Drive and try to do some due diligence.
All right, so stay organized, stay on top of things. Brad mentioned he's looking to protect some of his technology, potentially patent some of it. Are you thinking about any of that?
Not currently. Currently, we're laser focused on execution and growth, right? We believe that in the legal industry, someone's going to win this race, and that it is going to be a race. There's not young people in their 20s and 30s, not a lot of them, going to become stenographers and learning how to type on steno machines. So AI, and there's a shortage, a growing shortage of stenographers. So the supply is far below the demand for that profession, which would be good. If you did go to school, you'd probably have a good job, at least for a few years. So right now we're focused on growing more law firms, more practice areas, and just, focused on growth. But we will probably at some point focus on what aspect of this might be patentable.
All right, so let me just ask a question. Again, this is perhaps new to both of you, but I think particularly within the industries that you're working in, it's applicable. So lots of people here at South by Southwest, I'll call them geeks because I'm a geek. I've got an electrical engineering degree, love technology, want to play with it. When you're dealing with, let's say, Brad, you're dealing with physicians or surgeons, do you get, maybe not for this because it relates to the payment side, and I think everyone wants to get paid. I think that's a great part of your product, by the way. You're helping companies make sure they get the dollars in the door. But do you get, hey, I don't need another app to make my life easier?
100%. I will say that the younger generation is much more understanding and willing to adopt something. At a certain age, I've been doing this 25 years. I know how to do this. All you're going to do is busy me with more things. And at Gale AI, one of the things, because we're 3 practicing orthopedic surgeons, we understood the pain of button clicks. And so there was a company that rolled out a new feature, and it required you to do 6 more button clicks per patient per day. And when you did the math on that, that was 300 button clicks that you had to do additionally to do the same documentation. And so one of the things that we did at Gale AI is we said the fewest button clicks is the best. We don't want to create a new work process. This should fit seamlessly into the current process. And that's what we've done. So by integrating into EMRs, our initial development was on a web app. Now we're directly integrated so that the physician can literally go from their note, click 4 buttons, click send, and the note is transcribed, it is documented, it is coded, and now it's onto the billing department.
So a quick comment on my side of what I would say is, yes, the pain of button clicks, because I'm there as a professional myself in terms of, hey, how do I get this business process done? And people are like, oh, it's just an extra click. I'm like, times 1,000, times 2,000, or it's 3 extra clicks. And then there's latency, because if I have to wait after every click, then I'm trying to basically plow through the items, if you will. I think those are important things. So for the developers out there, we should keep that in mind. So it looks like we got about 2 minutes left, and Karl, that's probably perfect for you.
That's perfect, 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
So our biggest challenge really is the status quo. And so we have a little bit of a unique challenge with Scribe because attorneys, a lot of them don't even know that they can do something like use an alternative to a traditional court reporter. So they've never had a reason to look. And so part of what we're doing is educating through webinars, through podcasts, and things like that. But I would say what's been refreshing to hear from the attorneys who have tried it, even some of the older attorneys who maybe really weren't eager to change, is the speed is what's so important. Our goal is to get to the truth faster so that the attorneys and their clients can move their cases faster and get a result, whether that's a settlement or whatever it is, quicker. And when you finish, a deposition or a hearing or whatever it is, and you have that testimony, that video record, and a transcript just as soon as it's over, that means you can digest it immediately and you can begin to get ready for the next thing in the case, whether that's a deposition or a motion or whatever it is. Otherwise, the alternative is you are waiting weeks to get a copy of your transcript, and in the meantime, you're thinking, as the attorney who takes depositions, I'm pretty sure the witness said this, XYZ, that I got that testimony that I needed to get. And so what we're seeing is while a lot of attorneys are coming to us for the cost savings, they're staying for the speed savings.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point no matter what your product is. So making sure that you've got that speed and make sure you've got that user friendliness, no, click, extra clicks, latency, those are things you want to watch for. I just want to say thank you everyone here and thank you everyone on the podcast. And thank you, Karl, thank you, Brad, for your time. I know you're up next, so we'll take a quick break and stay around for the second session. Thank you. Awesome, guys. Thank you.